and at the same time, I don't completely fault them for it, because if you,
I understand,
you know, because I come from a nursing background, we're supposed to think about health promotion and disease prevention, and fortunately, I chose UF because a third of my doctorate was public health, and I think I mentioned to you, I wanted to do my dissertation on hormone therapy, and they go, nope, you're going to do it on obesity and weight management, because we see the trend, and this is what you have to do. And I kind of pushed back, and they were like, well, if you want to graduate, you're going to do what we say. And I'm like, okay, you know, just follow the rules, so I can get the degree. And it turned out to be the best thing in the world.
Hello and welcome. My name's Kerry Sheffield, photographer and CEO of my own successful business. I'm also the host of She Networks, a great believer in lifting up women and loyal supporter to those that are around me. We're all surrounded by incredible women who are breaking the molds in this thing called life. Behind every successful online persona is a real person facing struggles, failures, and living real life stories that don't always have happy endings. We will have an honest conversation, dispel this myth of perfection, and find out what they consider a success, how they achieved it, and learn what they are still reaching for. You are not alone. Join the conversation.
So I'm really excited and happy to introduce to you Dr. Wanita Patterson. And before we start talking, Wanita came to me through referral. And in the past couple of years, and you know, I'm going to touch on myself a little bit because I've just turned 50 years old, but I would say from around about the age of 48, I could see a change. It wasn't just a change in how I felt. I'm perimenopausal. I'm not menopausal. Menopausal means that you've gone for at least a year without periods, but I'm perimenopausal, and I was having all of the other symptoms, hot flashes. Hot flushes, we call them in England, but hot flashes they say here, night sweats, anxiety, all of those things. I was also going through a huge amount of stress in my personal life, which is still there, but cut to last year around about August. I think initially the hot flushes, you just kind of accept it and you just live with it. But then around about August last year, I just walked into another colleague's place and I was telling her how I was feeling, really about the physical stuff, the sweating. And I was at the end of my tether, honestly. And to a point that I was feeling like, I'm not going to say I was suicidal. I'm not going to say that I've not had those thoughts, because I have, but for these reasons and for the reasons in my life. But I was at the point where I felt like I could not go on any longer as I was. This was not a life I wanted to live in this way. And I'd been to see many medical doctors and my OBGYN and even a female version of, and they did not give me any solution that made me feel like I knew what was happening or I was going in a better direction. Enter this feisty woman that, can I tell you something?
Sure.
And I think it was our first conversation. And when I say this, I mean it as a compliment, because I know that people say it about me. I came home and I said to my husband, I love her, she's batshit crazy, and I know so much about her already that I never thought I'd ever get to hear about, but you completely changed my life.
Oh, I'm so happy
in that moment. I haven't cried yet this round, but you know, it was just, I do not, and people know me that follow me and on my platforms, and I've talked about this stuff, I'm really not good at hiding how I feel. I've had to hide a lot of the stuff because it's to do with my family. But I think my emotional situation exacerbated my physical reactions. But I had put on weight. I was having these awful hot sweats in the day, the flashes. It was like 20 times a day, and it came really fast. And then it could be freezing in here, and I would just be like break out in a sweat, and then the nighttime sweats. Oh my God! Like, we need plastic sheets. It's insane, you know. And what it does as a female, it completely strips away. If there's so much shame, you're embarrassed. It's like someone's pointing an arrow at you, telling you how old you are. You want to not be seen. You want to not be out in public. The amount of anxiety it causes. I actually wanted to find out how bad that anxiety was, and the rate of suicide in women between 45 and 64 jumps considerably. And we're not talking about this enough, and hence why you're here. I want more people to know about you. You know, I stop people in the supermarket that are having a hot flush. I go, I know a lady, and I introduce you. So that was a big old introduction. Talk to us about who you are, where you're from, what your professional role is, and then we're going to have a real deep dive on how you can save other women like you saved me.
Well, it's interesting because I've thought about this so much recently, right? And you just never know where your life's going. But I very specifically remember a conversation with my dad when I was very young. And I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and he was the oldest of 9. His mother was the oldest of 9. I was the oldest of 8. And he, somewhere along where I was prepubescent or in puberty, he said, I don't know what happens to you women, but I've been here my whole life, and it happens to all of them, and something changes. You know, we don't always change. We don't change as men. We're just still the same stupid slobs, right? But women change, and I don't know what it is. And then they get divorced, and then they hate us, and we're completely confused about it. And I have seen in my own family, I think, which is what precipitated this for me. I don't remember which sister said it to me. One of them said, you have to figure this out because we can't be like this, you know. And, you know, to keep the privacy of one of my family members, horrible PMS, horrible postpartum depression, severe, what we now call premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where 2 weeks of the month, there's nothing about your life that's good. And then all of a sudden, you have your period and your hormones come back. And
it's a joke, right, to people? I mean, it's like a joke. Oh, she must be on her period.
Yeah.
Or her period's coming. And there's even loads of memes now. I mean, I think humor has a place in order to not make it a big, scary thing. But let's not minimize it.
Menstrual cycle. Yes. You know, it was, like you said, it was full of shame. It was the rag. You know, I mean, all of these horrible words. And yeah, as women, we're emotional creatures. I think that's a great thing.
Yes.
You know, because there's got to be emotion in families. And it was so odd that when I originally went to nursing school, clear back in 1976, my first rotation was in a psychiatric hospital. And there was just a group of people, intellectually disabled, schizophrenics, sociopaths, and then a group of women with a diagnosis of nervous breakdown. And, you know, we didn't get Prozac till 1981. So what happened to these women? They, with their local doctor, family doctor didn't understand it. Their spouse didn't understand it. They did seem to be presenting with nervous breakdown and all these horrible symptoms, and probably suicidal. And their only treatment that I remember seeing, because there wasn't much pharmacology back then, is electroshock therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
And whenever I tell that story to somebody, it's almost they remember someone in their famand
my mother
having
had
experienced that, right?
Yeah.
And why it didn't ring in anybody's head that this was hormonal, and I can only assume because the majority of healthcare providers were men. And yet, I still now, you would think it would have changed if you come fast forward to 2024, that the women would know this.
And it's like a reset therapy. So, okay, I feel that what you've done for me, to a certain degree, is reset my hormones. And so now, and we're going to talk more about keeping an eye on that. There are health aspects. I want you to talk about, you know, the studies that have been made in scaring people.
Right.
The reason I felt comfortable coming to you, and I still need to manage myself, and I've learned that you need to manage yourself here more. Maybe our ignorance in the UK is stupid, that we just let our doctors do everything and we don't read everything. But now I feel like, and even my OBGYN, the new guy that I just saw, said, yeah, you basically have to manage yourself. You cannot sit in ignorance about what's happening with your body. But before I came to you, because I was going through such a crisis, I spent weeks researching all the different hormone therapies, and I didn't know what to do. And the trouble is, there's a lot of information out there, but there's not a lot of information out there coming from people that you trust unless you're sat in front of them. And what you did for me, you listened. We had a whole hour of conversation. I cried a lot. And then, we talked about, I do tell everyone, you told me I'm a piece of dying fruit because it just makes me laugh a lot. And I'm like, yeah, I'm an old grapefruit. But it was so nice to be heard and not patronized. But so let's dial back on you. I want to, because you're not up there in Women's Health Clinic and you're not over in the hospital. I know you work in hospitals, so please talk about that. But I want to qualify you for the people that word of mouth is one thing, but people want assurances when it comes to their health that they're not taking risks. So I just want you to lay down the pathway that brought you to where you are.
Well, for us as women in my age, because I'm 65, we didn't have a lot of options. We just assumed we'd get married to another farmer, right? Yeah. And I knew I wanted more than that. And I was lucky enough, I went to nursing school, and I was a registered nurse at the age of 20. I can't even believe that now. And then I was pre-med at University of Iowa on a full scholarship, and I just simply got burned out. I didn't have any mentor. I didn't have anyone to help me figure, just take a break, right? And got married, started my family, and then I woke up one day, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I just left an entire education on the table. And so I just went back. And as I'm working, and coming from a farm, I have a strong work ethic, and I love working, that every job led to another job. But I knew I couldn't go and become a physician at this point, but I knew the next opportunity was a nurse practitioner. So somehow, unfortunately, energy is my superpower. Yeah. That I was able to juggle a lot of these things at one time and know what to leave on the table in terms of my hobbies and friendships and all these kind of things. And so eventually went to University of Florida and got my master's. And then I took a break and continued working and continued raising my daughters, and knowing I always wanted a doctorate in nursing practice. And once my youngest was kind of toward the end of her college years, I reapplied for my doctorate at UF, and lucky enough to get in, and continued working and doing my residency, and ultimately graduating with my doctorate in nursing practice. And my mentor, and I think it's important to acknowledge our mentors, was Katie Porte, who was she had a 501c here called Quest.
Right, okay.
In Orlando, and we walked every day, and we all need mentors. And as I age out, I realize I'm getting fewer and fewer, so I'm struggling looking for one.
You are the mentor.
I've become that person, and I still need another person. So I can call on my sisters, for example, and college friends. But she said, go start your own practice. That's what you did all this for. You know people, and the way the Florida law is set up, until recently, you needed a physician to be a collaborating physician, and it's became a looser and looser relationship as nurse practitioners have taken bigger hold.
Because you can go to your general practitioner and never see them. You see the
correct, and eventually, and very recently, they developed autonomous practice in Florida, which I went ahead and I've completed all those requirements as a primary care provider. And because I've worked in so many venues of cardiology and internal medicine and family practice and ran some nursing homes. That's 48 years. I mean, there's a lot that happens. That I was lucky enough, I also spent 6 years in an integrated medical practice with an OBGYN who was doing a lot of hormone therapy at Sajun Medical Center. And she was a great mentor, and went to all the conferences. Back then,
well, you love educating yourself.
I love education.
I love that about you.
I just love reading and learning new things, and I see one of my current roles of trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Because there's so much information out there, and not taking anything away from any of the platforms, not everyone has the academic credentials to talk about it. Yeah. And I just want to be the clinician, so I can rely on some of my favorite, Dr. Wanita Patterson and Peter Attia and all these great names, and let them get the research and assimilate that information, and then I can read it, and then I can share what I think makes sense. Because I don't think everything everyone tells me makes sense, because I've also been doing this for 48 years. Yeah. And so where I do get a little bit witchy is I can sit and listen to a story, and I already know what I want to do. And I don't always need blood work to know what I need to do. But we still do
that was the
work.
thing about it. But I just liked your. So I think And yeah, that's just the way I talk. But I think what it is, so many medical practitioners you sit down with are so protective of being sued, for want of a better expression.
Right.
You know, they're so conservative in how they speak to you. There's no honesty there. You just say it how it was. And I liked that about you. The fact that you're so forward thinking, and you're educating yourself, you're authentic, was the good witch in you. You know, back in Henry VIII's days, you would have had a garden of herbs, and you would have, you've seen Outlander, you know who you would have been. So that's what I meant by that. And just in your delivery, it was refreshingly honest, and there's a lack of it. I mean, I left my OBGYN like going, wow, I have no idea where I am now.
Right. And at the same time, I don't completely fault them for it, because if I
understand.
You know, because I come from a nursing background, we're supposed to think about health promotion and disease prevention. And fortunately, I chose UF because a third of my doctorate was public health. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned to you, I wanted to do my dissertation on hormone therapy. And they go, nope. You're going to do it on obesity and weight management, because we see the trend and this is what you have to do. And I kind of pushed back, and they were like, well, if you want to graduate, you're going to do what we say. And I'm like, okay. You know, just follow the rules so I can get the degree. And it turned out to be the best thing in the world, because there's...
Talk about that a little bit,
Yeah, no one ever talks, everyone just says, go lose weight. And they don't say, well, how did it happen? And it even happened to me. I went into menopause like it was a surgical hysterectomy. Right. And it was due to stress. Mm-hmm. And I was starting my doctorate, and our medical director was taking a leave. And I gained 10 pounds in 10 minutes. I mean, I was boxing 3 times a week. I mean, I was fit, right? And I thought, I can't believe this is happening, because it really is true. And I never disbelieve somebody. When somebody tells me their story, I take what they say for truth. Yeah.
I mean, we all know what we do and we don't do to put on weight. We all know. But the true fact is, you can't eat the way you did 15 years ago. And, I miss those days. But even then, you know, weight's always been a crisis for me. I mean, I was never really that heavy, but in the world I lived in, I was too heavy to be this and not heavy enough to be that. You know, it was an interesting balance. I was always just a little bit curvier. And I'm not unhappy with who I was. I mean, I was 8 months ago when I came to see you first, because I had no control. It was spiraling out of control. I mean,
and you can't sleep, and you have mood disorders. So I tell people all the time, until we can get you back to feeling like you, and the way I describe it is that day 14 of your cycle.
Yes.
When we love everybody, we love ourselves, we love our spouse, we want to have sex, we want to have babies. I mean, it's just that perfect time when everything
until they speak, and then
sometimes that's true. And I think that all of those things you have to look at, and I think that's, you have to fix sleep, you have to help your mood, your energy has to come back, because you can't do these hard things of changing how you live. And it has to be something fun. I mean, when people come to me, and I can tell by looking at them, they think it's going to be a chore. I'm like, you got to reframe this. Yeah. You have to rethink about this differently, because you can't go back there. No. This is where we are right now. And we're lucky enough that we have information at our hands. And, you know, this concept of intermittent fasting is great for what I say a 17-year-old boy who runs track, who is a normal metabolism.
Go through the generations. Let's talk about weight management a little bit, because I know it's a big thing. Obesity in America is huge.
It's huge.
And, you know, I think some of the big drinks that go around, one of the biggest factors, you know, you see people, and I'm not talking about the massive Stanley cups of water, I'm talking about the sodas and all that kind of stuff. No,
you're right.
But, you know, you drinking a day's worth of calories in one cup, like, and just calling it a drink, you know, and I've seen that. But, yeah, there does seem to be a thing here, and I don't know whether that is additives. You travel from America to Europe. Do you see the imbalance? Do you see where we're going wrong over here?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, people will tell me all the time, well, first of all, I'm moving more there.
Yes.
Right? And they're following their steps. And I went to Italy, and I went to Rome, and I went to England, and I walked 10,000 steps, but I never gained any weight, and I ate 3 times a day. And I can say that for myself, having made several trips. So you know it's a combination of things. It's a combination of you're calm, you're relaxed, food quality is clearly different. I mean, a lot of people who have gut issues and food sensitivities, I can eat anything I want.
Really?
When I'm over there, because a lot of
because
it's
some of the
it's grown
ingredients here
differently.
that aren't allowed in Europe.
Right.
They're just completely
Yeah.
banned. I do not understand what is the mentality behind food producers. Like there are some
Profit.
brands that
Profit.
Yeah, but some of the ingredients that they use here that are illegal in Europe. Why don't you just do it across the board? But they just don't.
And it's clearly changing because it's how we choose to spend our money as well.
I know, but then they're making healthy food too expensive. I mean, I know a lot of people that help in the community and with the homeless and with people that are living in poverty. They can afford to go and buy a meal at McDonald's for the whole family, but they can't afford to go to Whole Foods or a fresh market or whatever and buy really good fresh food that they can actually prepare.
Right.
This is devastating.
Well, and I was saying to my daughter Erica last night, in World War II, everyone would have had a garden.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have found the food.
Yeah, and in Africa, when I travel to Africa, they are picking tea in the daytime, but they go to these tea gardens and they have a tiny scrap of garden. Their potatoes and everything, they grow that. That's their basic needs are met there, and they have chickens or whatever.
And I remember my mom having a huge garden, and she had 7 kids in 10 years. The second canned foods came out, it was done almost.
Yeah.
Because it was so easy and it was so convenient, and trying to make their lives less work. You know, the ringing washing machines before we had regular washing machines or before we had dishwashers. I mean,
so this life of convenience we have here more.
I think that really set it off, right? And then there was TV dinners and the TVs and sitting in front of the TV. I mean, everything just changed. And but I'm hopeful because I start to see things change. But talking about the affordability, I try to talk to people about that because, you know, I can't come up with a treatment strategy if you can't afford it anyway, right?
Yeah.
But I think I love to lean into eating seasonally. And as I mentioned earlier, my whole backyard is as much of a garden as I can have, and I've been in the same house for 30 years. And I think in some respects, if people actually had a garden, they would probably quit complaining a little bit about the price of food because it takes so much effort and so much time. But I like to make soups. You know, I can afford to have an organic chicken, but I'm not throwing anything away. I'll save the bones and I'll turn it into a soup. And if I've grilled vegetables, I save the vegetables and I turn that into a soup or a stew.
So did you change your diet? You know, let's take weight and health and tie it in with the menopause and women because, you know, that's my audience.
Yes.
Did you change your diet dramatically after you gained 10 pounds and you were going through that change?
Well, I did time-restricted eating, so I already knew about that research. And that was the advantage of having that as a dissertation. So I've seen all this changing
and
stuff.
that helps. But talk about what that means for people that don't know.
So what that means is learning to, well, actually going back and trying to live more of a life with our natural circadian rhythm, which is sunrise to sunset.
Right.
And a lot of the research with Dr. Sachin Panda and Dr. Rhonda Patrick and all these other thought leaders, our metabolism truly does slow down in late afternoon, so we do get ready to go to bed, and maybe we should sleep 12 hours like every other species, and yet we don't. We're always pushing the, you know, on staying up later and later and later to get more done because everyone wants so much from us. And so what I did is you get to the point you hate yourself, right? And I'm short, so 10 pounds was felt like a million. I decided I wasn't going to eat after 4 o'clock, like it was a religion.
Right.
And then I was going to have 2 days a week. I was going to just eat 1 meal a day. And I told everybody, so then I was kind of held accountable.
You're like me, I do that.
Yeah, and it really does help a lot. And I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks.
Wow.
But it was quick weight. So even though I had gained it, it wasn't my set point weight. My set point weight's always been around 129, you know, and when we're younger and fitter and more muscle mass, that 129 sure looks different than it does at 65, right? Yeah. But I can at least say my labs look good. I'm physically healthy at that, but I think this is the hard part, and this is why
Were you changing what you ate? Or
Not
you
really,
sound like you were a
not
pretty
really.
relatively healthy person
it's
anyway.
not really changing what I ate. I would say, like you said, choosing liquid calories different. I mean, I'm lucky that sweet has never been my thing. It's always been salt. I mean, I remember taking a bag of popcorn kernels and throwing them in my attic.
Right.
So I wouldn't just eat popcorn, you know. And 2018 was really stressful for me. You know, I went through a divorce, and I needed ear surgery for hearing loss. And it was hard, you know, and I felt like I became my own patient, because that's the challenge, is what do you do when it's you now? And I remember doubling my progesterone and making sure I took my estradiol and made sure I took my supplements and focused on my sleep and just tried to figure out who I was again in this new life as a single person. And and I'd already done all that other stuff, but I sometimes I feel blessed going through these struggles, because if I can come out the other side, then I know I can help other people. And I think what you said earlier about going every place and nobody having an answer is so difficult, because what happened with, when you talked about research, with women were getting hormone therapy before 2002, right? They were getting Premarin and they were getting Provera, and a lot of women felt good, and you know, they did this huge landmark study, and before we knew it, they were telling everybody it's dangerous, stop.
So let's talk about that. So what is the reality? What is dangerous? Why are they saying it's dangerous? And let's, because, you know, when I tell some people that I'm using hormone therapy, they're like, oh, I wouldn't touch it, it's going to give you cancer. Let's just let people know that we produce estrogen on our own, and that is a contributing factor to cancer too. So let's talk about the danger, and I want you to demystify that for us and tell us the reality of what that is.
So fortunately, I don't have to convince anyone of anything anymore.
No.
Because we always knew that WHI was a bad study. And anybody who...
That's the World Health...
Women's Health Initiative.
Yes.
And I remember working in a clinical practice at that time, and every single phone call, because it was all over the national TV. Okay, you have to stop. But there was no other solution to it. And it was the first time in my entire career I ever remember one medicine being, okay, it's not a good medicine, that they decided any other medicine within that class of hormone therapy was all bad. I mean, I can just tell you all kinds of meds that came off the market as not being good meds for benefit-risk ratio, but they didn't take all the others off the market, including cholesterol-lowering medicine. So, again, it was really pitiful, and fortunately, you know, we had a lot of people, including Suzanne Summers, who herself was suffering so much with hormone, with her hormone symptoms, and because she was a celebrity, she was able to
I don't
write.
know who
She was actually because you're from from the U.S. So she was a movie
famous.
star,
right? Oh, okay.
And so she wrote books on this, and they became bestsellers, and we were like, I want this. I want to have what you're having, right?
Yeah.
And fortunately, there was a whole field of anti-aging medicine that they've tried to rebrand multiple times. Like, it's wrong to say I want to be anti-aging.
Right.
I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing.
I mean,
at all.
we're all cutting up our faces and doing all these things to ourselves. Yeah, I could honestly say you dialed me back a good couple of years. Yeah. I felt physically.
Just by sleeping. I mean, there's so much information now on getting a good night's sleep and your health, that including dementia, right? Yeah. And I think so much comes back to good sleep and energy, and to go back to where the safety of hormone therapy is. All this new good information's been out there in terms of not having heart attacks and strokes and breast cancer and blood clots. And I remember there was an article published in 2012. His name was Dr. Muick, and in Climacteric, and he separated oral estrogen and transdermal estradiol and progestin and progesterone, and very brilliantly said, they're not the same. That transdermal estradiol does not increase the risk of heart attack, strokes, breast cancer, blood clot, and progesterone is not progestin, and it's actually neutral to the blood pressure and neutral to all of these other things. And that's the hormone therapy we should be using. And I really never heard very many people talk about it, but I think it's because it was published not in the United States, right?
Okay.
And now you fast forward to the North American Menopause Society and the American College of Obstetric and Gynecology in 2022 changed their position statements and finally said, well, hormone therapy delivered this way actually improves quality of life. We know it protects the bones, it protects the cardiovascular system, and now we also know it's neurologically protective. Dr. Dale Bredesen wrote that in his book, The End of Alzheimer's Disease. And then in February of 2023, the New York Times, women have been misled about menopause.
Yeah.
And I think that author should just get a Pulitzer.
Yeah, and it's coming up everywhere.
It's coming up everywhere now.
People are
and
now talking about it.
about
I think women are still afraid to talk about it. I'll go online and I'll talk about my experiences, and then there'll be comments and people are ready to have a conversation about it. But a lot of people, I can meet somebody that's 2 years older than me and they say, oh, but I'm not there yet. And I'm like, yeah, you are.
We're there at 30,
right?
if not sooner.
Exactly. So you may not be having the same symptoms of me. I think it's fabulous if you're skirting through and you're not getting it. And I know people that have just swum all the way through that and dismissed it entirely. That's great. But do not think that when you're not there yet. You are there yet.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Absolutely.
and I think you're in denial for yourself. And there's this whole kind of stiff upper lip and just get on with it. And you've only got to look at, you know, I was talking about age recently, and I said about, you know, the Golden Girls era where those women looked 80, but they were like 50 in that TV show. And so we've changed, and we expect more from ourselves, and we want to look younger longer, and we want to be younger longer more. And I've actually, when I think back to the UK and knowing women of a similar age, they looked older. And I feel like we definitely had a let's just get on with it kind of attitude. And I feel like here women have expect more and they want to feel better. But that being said,
it's changing in the UK.
Yeah,
because
it is.
I've been there recently.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people
they're all
podcasting and on
talking,
Instagram and celebrities are talking about it because this new generation came up and they're out there and it's terrifying. Yeah. And how the hell we got to it and didn't know how terrifying it was. And I want people to listen today and listen to you and go, okay, this is what I need to do. So I came to you with all of these feelings, and actually so many feelings, I had no idea what I was feeling. And then you kind of just dissected it, and we talked about weight, and you helped me with my weight, and you went, okay, we'll stop worrying about that, and we're going to do this for this, and we're going to do this, 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 and this. So in terms of my hormones, I started taking progesterone. So I take 200 milligrams a night, and you start there, and you can tell me why I did, but I started there, and I had tried to take that before alone, and I don't know what I was prescribed, but it made me feel prepubescent and pregnant and gave me all those symptoms. When I started taking it with you, I didn't get those, and I think maybe you introduced
because we start at lower doses.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think hormone therapy is different from any other way we should practice and prescribe, which is you should start at low doses and find the dose that fits the individual.
Yeah, and like you said to me at the time, I'd been lucky in my life. I'd never taken any medication ever. And I didn't really, I mean, I was sterilised when I was really young because I'd had all my babies before I was 30. So I couldn't have any children after 30. Yeah. So I'd never really taken the pill or anything, not for a long period of time. But I'd never taken any medication. So I started with that. And then you'll laugh at how I describe this. And then I have estradiol, and I have it as a cream that I put on my arm, like a gel.
Yes.
A pump, tiny, minute PA-size amount. I mean, would you say 1 milligram, 2 milligrams?
I have a few women, you know, when I always like to draw the bell curve, right? And so for progesterone therapy, for somebody who's before menopause, it could be an average dose of 50 milligrams, if it's oral, 50 milligrams to 150 milligrams. And then we have outliers who take a lot more. Like my endometriosis patients usually take much higher, 300 to 400 milligrams.
Oh, okay.
I take 300 milligrams.
Maybe I should.
And then on the other end of the bell curve, there are women who don't really tolerate very much oral progesterone, so they do better with a topical or a transdermal progesterone. And even more rare, women who take a little bit of oral progesterone and a topical progesterone. And then you add women of color, we know there's always the risk of developing melasma.
Oh, okay.
That's why they get the pregnancy mask, you know,
Right,
and the dark on their face. So those women, I often just start on topical anyway, just to diminish that risk, because nobody wants that, right?
No.
And then I have another group of women who their hormones are, there'll be times where they fall below that physiological level, and they're not fully in menopause yet, but they're having pauses, and they're having hot flashes and night sweats. And so I do give them a little bit of estradiol.
So this is where I came in.
And then what you hope is you kind of just go like this into menopause. Me, I went like that.
Yeah,
right?
me too, yeah.
And
that's a big drop for those who are
it's
watching.
a big drop, and your body's not used to it. And going back to when you talk about the women who seem to be symptom-free in menopause, eventually we start to developing another hormone called estrone, which is made by our belly fat, right? And we lose our shape and our figure, but we can feel fine. But you're still having aging. I mean, I tell women all the time, I can say this as a female, a man could never say this, is that if you have a couple that are together a good part of their life, he ages, and if he takes care of himself and he's got good health, he just looks like, you know, a silver fox.
Yeah.
In 20 years, that woman looks like his mother.
Yeah.
Because we age so rapidly. And I think that's where this is changing now, with how everyone's reversed their position statement and said, oh, we were wrong. And now we have this whole generation of women who didn't get hormone therapy. And where is their health? And some of them are coming in to see me, and I have no qualms at all starting them on hormone therapy. And Dr. Peter Attia, who just wrote the book Outlive, and I just listened to his podcast with Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and I'm encouraging everyone to listen to that 3-hour and 59-hour podcast. About 2/3 of the way into it, he also talks about the safety of hormone therapy and how sad and angry we feel that, and the women feel, for not getting this treatment, right? And because we can't do certain research on humans, right? She asked him, should women get hormone therapy after 60? And he goes, well, why would I want you to now start aging rapidly? We don't have all these answers, but I believe anyway that if we continue to prescribing these medications at physiological doses based kind of on where you are in menopause. You know, if you go into menopause at 30, the amount of estradiol your body's going to want at that time is much more than somebody who's 75. And I have women in their 80s who are on hormone therapy. And the dose I give them is clearly different than the dose I gave them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it has to be an individualized approach, and I think, and I hope that now that everybody wants to prescribe hormones, right, that they figure out how to prescribe in a way that's correct for the patient and safe for the patient. And so they, like you said, to tolerate it. Now, the commercial progesterone originally was branded Prometrium. It only comes 2 doses, 100 and 200 milligrams. And every single time somebody says, can't I just have that dose? They don't usually do well because they're not titrating it. But if they get to that dose, then I let them try it. You want to use it commercially and you want your insurance to pay for it? If it works, I'm fine with that. If it's not working, then we'll just switch back. No big deal. I never prescribe oral estrogen. I don't think there's any indication to. And I don't think that, though pellets, a lot of women like them, I just think it's an unnecessary procedure.
Is this the... so I had one round... Oh, God, I make people laugh now. I had one round... This is too much information. I apologise to my husband. So I had one round of testosterone from my OBGYN. I felt like I was being sold to. I wasn't taking progesterone or any topical estrogen. I did one round of 3 pellets, and they stitch it just under the skin on the back of my hip. I felt like I got the full dose in 1 week, and I was about to grow a penis. That's literally how I couldn't wear jeans. I mean, let's not cut to the chase. That's what that does to you. And so it might have been fun, you know, I'd be like, get home now because otherwise I'm going to climb up the walls. But, you know, it clearly wasn't, and I don't think they can manage really how those pellets dissolve and distribute. Right. So I have a testosterone cream that you give me, and I call it like my if I want to feel spicy that day, I'll get the testosterone out and I'll add to it.
And that's the advantage of blood work, because I think women, I mean, let's face it, people give themselves much more dangerous medicine every day, and it's called insulin, right? Or they're on a Coumadin, which is a blood thinner, basically rat poison. I mean, these are
Or we drink and then we smoke.
Right,
and all those
of these things.
Yeah.
So to make like you said, make hormone therapy sound like it's so dangerous, it's just ridiculous.
Can you tell us what each, it's the three things, isn't it? It's progesterone, estrogen, or estradiol.
Right.
And, and testosterone. So what are each one of those things doing for me? So I'm your atypical person coming in at 48, whatever, and what is that doing for me?
I always start with progesterone.
Okay.
With women having a uterus and not having a uterus, because as I describe progesterone, I think it's the body's natural Xanax, right? It's calming for how many women.
And I did not know all of these things.
Yeah. So for women who used to sleep and then all of a sudden lighter sleep, more anxiety, heart palpitations,
brain fog, dizziness.
That's the first hormone to fall. And I say before environmental pollution because I wish all these wonderful experts and all these people writing books and being on TV would talk about the impact of environmental pollution, air pollution, water pollution, food pollution.
Everyone's got allergies now. Yeah.
Right. I wish they would use their voice, but I think they're afraid to. Right. You know, I'm just a single person. I'm not a threat to anybody, and I'm not afraid of anybody. So, I talk about it that I'm seeing these progesterone deficiency symptoms earlier and earlier and earlier, and all this infertility for women. You know, and now men are going to reproductive endocrinologists because their semen quality isn't good, or their counts are low, or their testosterone level is low. You can't tell me that's not environmentally driven, right? And so for women, instead they go to their primary care doctor, or they get sent to a psychiatrist, or even their gynecologist, and it's so easy, say, okay, well, for your anxiety, it must be your stressful life, let me just give you a prescription medicine.
So they're masking, but they're not actually.
It's
therapy. It's not curing.
Right? I mean, we're trying to go to root cause, and if you don't believe hormones are causing this, that old phrase, your eyes can only see what your mind knows. Yeah. That if you don't know this is how women start presenting, right? Yeah. You're not going to think about it. And in my field, and part of getting my autonomous practice was what they call differential diagnosis. If somebody comes into me with a group of symptoms, I'm supposed to think of everything. Has there been trauma? What were your traumas in your life? Is it all your hormones, or is it the stress in your life, or do you have hyperthyroidism? I mean, I'm supposed to think of all of that. I don't necessarily share it all with my patients, but I'm supposed to think of it anyway. And I usually write it down because I write good progress notes, right? Yeah. And I think that when women then get their progesterone, and you're right, I do spend that full hour trying to educate women because we have a right to know what's happening to us, right? And then it makes sense. And when it makes sense, it makes you want to do it. And it makes you feel, oh, I can do this, and I can go up on this progesterone, and I'm almost there. I mean, I've had women 125 milligrams wasn't enough, but 150 was too much, right? And they know. And I said, okay, let's find your sweet spot. Yeah. And then when you talk about estradiol, it is they used to say, oh, I'm estrogen dominant. Well, of course you are. We're women. We should be estrogen dominant. But what makes you feel like you feel? It's a progesterone deficiency. And I think that's where, when we move forward, everyone's going to acknowledge the importance of progesterone, because women with hysterectomies, by their gynecologist, they don't get progesterone, almost never. They'll get estradiol. I have a young patient now who had a surgical hysterectomy in her early 30s, and all she was given was oral estrogen. And and it didn't work for her for a variety of reasons.
And they give them that to protect the bones, but they're not looking at her, how she's feeling,
she
and
can't
emotional.
sleep, she's gained weight, she's irritable.
It's aging her. For all the reasons.
And so I get the progesterone on board first, and I want that stable dose with or without a uterus. And then I add the estradiol at, usually, depending on the age of the individual, maybe a medium dose, right? And there's lots of commercial transdermal estradiols out there. And
patches, creams, all the things.
Patches, creams, gels, and yet
whatever
some of them aren't
you.
affordable. So this is where people start using specialty compounding pharmacies.
Right, yeah.
And then you fast forward, you get from 52 to 65, and all of a sudden your Medicare doesn't want to cover your estradiol because it's dangerous
Well, no,
So
that's just an excuse
just an
because they don't want to
excuse.
pay for it.
Yeah,
That's it.
and so now you have to use a good RX
it was considered
card.
cosmetic than
Yeah,
it's necessary,
and-
which is absolute rubbish. But yeah,
And
there you
it
go.
is, and so then some women choose to use a specialty pharmacy, or some women don't want to use any commercial products. So I'll just use all the specialty compounded medications.
Yeah, and I'm using compounded and I tried it. I used the branded one, but $50 a month to $150 a month is going to make a big difference in my life.
Sure.
So I use their compound, and they know what they're doing, and they're doing the thing, and it works.
And
so.
I like to use the local people because I know the pharmacists. I'm not in the lab making it with them, but
I'm building a relationship with those
you build
pharmacists
relationship
too,
with these people, and there's a lot of national pharmacies that if somebody wants to use them, fine. You want to use them, I can send a prescription.
But you're
That's not a
anonymous
problem.
to them. You don't mean anything.
I don't mean anything. And then, when it comes to, and you get those two settled, then I add the testosterone.
Yeah, and the testosterone's doing what for us?
So let's talk about, if we only talk about bone health, right?
Mm-hmm.
A woman who gets osteoporosis, there's a 50% mortality rate, unless it's changed, in 5 years from that hip fracture. That's too high.
Yeah.
That's too high.
Because I always say when someone's older and they fall down, you're like,
that's
it,
right?
the end. Yeah.
And it's the beginning of the end. And so testosterone builds bone, and so does progesterone.
Right.
So I want to use both of those medicines at the highest dose that works for that individual without causing side effects. That's the key.
And I've been naughty because I haven't run and got all my tests done, and I need to. But because I had a recent health scare, and we'll talk about the dangers and what we need to look for. And the dangers aren't created by the hormones, they're created by ignorance and not knowing your body and what you're taking. And also being tested. So you created all these labs for me. What are you testing?
So if someone's not coming in with blood work,
So first, before they come to you, go get your blood work
Yes.
done, bring the panel to you.
if they bring a panel, they're usually bringing internal medicine labs,
Right,
which
okay.
are fine. And yet, because of my cardiology background, I also know they may not be looked at properly enough. And the challenge with ordering blood work, you also then should spend the time going over it. And I think what's happened with the healthcare system now is patients get their blood work done later, and then a medical assistant emails you on your portal and says they're all fine, but it doesn't mean anything.
No, I actually went in and looked at my numbers, and I saw that for all of the things that we're talking about, I was below, I was sub all of it. No one had flagged that to me, but it was only because I was feeling so bad, I went to do some research. But I mean, I did spend a lot of time looking.
And you shouldn't have to be your
No,
own doctor.
and I'm
You
not a
shouldn't-
doctor. I
Right,
don't
you
know
shouldn't have to
really.
be it, right?
I'm Google Doc, and that's it.
And I think that's the sad part is, fortunately, I've had wonderful professional mentors, and who we've all thought very much alike is you get the blood work and you bring the patient in and you go over the blood work and figure out how do the labs fit that individual and what's their cardiovascular risk. I mean,
So blood work is one thing.
Yes. And then what I try to do, because I realize people are paying out of pocket to see me, blood work's helpful, but the story's the most helpful. I mean, I was always taught by my mentors and academics, diagnosis is 90% history. And when you get a good history and you ask the right questions and you get the right story, you already kind of know what you need to do. And the blood work kind of seals the deal. And then it gives you that baseline moving forward, right? And what Dr. Atia does, and it's important for me to keep up and see what other people do, because I get new ideas too. I mean, I work in, again, why I like to make hospital rounds, because you see more and you don't get isolated in one tiny space. And when he actually looks at a woman's follicle stimulating hormone when he has them on estradiol and they're in menopause to the number 25, and that's how he decides what dose they need. But I look at symptoms and I look at blood work and I look at age, but I think I can add the follicle stimulating hormone. It's not going to cost any more money really, because I try to add all the right diagnosis codes that should be covered by insurance. So we look at all the hormones. Sometimes we look at, a lot of people talk about their adrenal glands, and they talk about stress, and they talk about cortisol, and you can't get that typically in an internal medicine office.
Right.
So I'll do a cortisol, and I'll do a DHEA, and I like to look at the advanced lipid panel, because unfortunately too many people are still dying of a heart attack and stroke.
Right.
And that's their first symptom is their event.
Okay.
And we know so much more about it. And nobody cares how you lower those numbers, but they need to be lower. And I tell people that. Either look at your diet, make the changes you're willing to make. If you want to take botanicals, take botanicals. But if you need to take prescription medicine, you should, because your hormone therapy isn't going to help you if you have an event. If you have a heart attack or a stroke, and I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So that whole person approach is helpful, right? And I think people appreciate it,
And now just having this conversation is kind of explained to me more.
Yeah.
Why all those tests work.
Yeah, and you come in, you complain about weight and low energy. Well, of course I have to look at your thyroid. And I have to make sure you're not iron deficient because you're a woman who's been having periods.
Yeah.
So that's part of that differential diagnosis concept of getting the blood work, and then moving forward after that, I pick and choose what we need to order when. I mean, everybody needs a vitamin D level, but they don't need it every 6 months necessarily if they're therapeutic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the good fortune of me having so many opportunities to work in so many different kind of venues that I just have the background. And I love it. I love taking care of people, and I love when people feel better, because I know it sounds kind of silly, but that gives me the opportunity to help you to do the good work that you do. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have some people who do a lot of charity work, and if they feel good, they can do their work. And so we're all just kind of, that part will make me cry, because that's the part that you can't do in a typical medical practice, because it's so driven now by private equity. I think everybody wants to help their patient. They just don't have the venue and the system in place.
And you're a practitioner, but you're also a therapist of sorts, because you're listening to so much information. And it is emotional.
It is
and it's
emotional.
okay.
It's our lives.
Yeah, and
that's our life.
And
it
it's not
really
just
is.
women. You're also dealing with men. Let's talk about sex too, because why it's funny, isn't it, how women's libido can die? Yeah. And I see the peaks and troughs, and really, the female. The biggest erogenous zone is our brain, generally.
Yeah, we gotta like you.
Yeah, right. And it's what you say and whatever. I mean, I can hype myself up all day, and then they come in and say something, and I'm like, damn, well, that just killed that mood. But you know what I mean? I definitely saw a change. And it was funny. The only good thing about having hot flushes was my husband was like, and I told everyone in my group this, that he said, just walk around the house naked. But you know what? You don't want to lie in bed, because I used to always get a hot flush around about 11 o'clock would be a bad one. And it's like, it's how I describe this, if you've not had it yet, to understand how this felt. And I put it akin to when I breastfed my children, you'd get this wave of hormone. And when you just used to cry, and I'd be like, no, I'm fine, it's just the milk's coming or whatever. But you'd get this wave, and I used to get these waves, and it makes you feel untouchable. But
100%.
But what are we losing? And I think it might happen to men too. I think men do have hormone deficiencies.
They
just don't want to accept it. But definitely testosterone, and definitely I'm going to go there. So the physical element of a man that declines, and that's an erection, and then a woman's desire, and vaginal dryness, and all of those things. What the hell? Why? And and it's so let's talk about all those physical things that people out here might be feeling, and kind of give them some reasons why it's happening and how they can help themselves.
It's very interesting, because what you reminded me about the vaginal dryness is the third estrogen, estriol.
Yes, and you talked about topical applications of things, yeah.
The only time it's really measurable, and that's why I don't measure it, is when we're pregnant. And I think any woman who's ever been pregnant, I still remember what my skin felt like. It was soft and luscious, and a baby comes out of the vagina usually, and how's that happen, right? It's this wonderful, wonderful hormone. And we've learned we can put it vaginally, and it can help the collagen of the vaginal tissue, but we can also put it on our face and our neck, and it can help collagen. It's all over now in terms of YouTube and all the podcasts, and yet it's been around for a long time. So it is another hormone I use really liberally because progesterone and estriol both are anti-inflammatory.
So what was that one again?
It's E3.
E3.
Right. And estradiol's E2 and
Okay.
estrone is E1. And so estriol and progesterone are both anti-inflammatory and immune modulating hormones. And there are case studies where women who get pregnant who have autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis actually go into remission when they're pregnant. They go into remission. They've never felt better. And women who love pregnancy, and I was one of them, love progesterone. And I've never seen anyone publish any data on this, but I just know it clinically.
Yeah, we had that conversation, and I enjoyed being pregnant.
Yeah, and I'm like, then you're going to love progesterone. And they always do. But women who say, I don't like pregnant, then I'm like, pump the brakes, be cautious. I know they're not going to like it as much. And that's just something I learned over years of practice, right? But when you come back to testosterone, in the NHS, because I was just there, and so whenever I travel, I kind of like...
And the NHS is National Health System in the UK service,
They now have a testosterone, even though it's not commercially available. I saw that it's going to be available, 5 milligrams per gram, testosterone gel for women, with the indication just sex drive. And yet, testosterone is so much more than that, right? So much more than that. And Dr. Attia talks about there's going to be a commercial testosterone for women, same reason, for low sex drive. And it's important. It's really important, but it does more, right?
Yeah.
It gives us our mojo. I like to describe them as alpha females, you know, and I see women who are admittedly alpha females, and I am one, love testosterone. And I think when we talk about the pellets, those women who love the pellets and who love these high doses of testosterone, that probably was their norm, you know, and if we're...
Well, for me, I think it was just, I don't think
they didn't gradually go up on the dose.
I think I felt like it was just... Boom,
right.
You know, and there was a lot of other deficiencies, but you know, I could have humped a whale with that in that period bit of time, but
we don't want to trigger side effects. We don't want to trigger.
And I didn't realize I'd have physical.
Loss. Yeah. Oh, and clitoromegaly.
Yeah, I mean, and that, you know, it comes without a warning. Like, let's
and Dr.
find out about that.
He goes, well, you know, women, you know, you can all, which is true. We can put testosterone vaginally as well, and it can also help because it absorbs so much faster.
Yes.
And I had one woman, I'll never forget this. She came to me and she said, my gynecologist told me I'm using too much testosterone. Though her numbers are fine, she felt fine. I said, why? Well, because my clitoris is enlarged. I said, is that a problem for you? No. I said, then shut up.
Yeah.
Leave you alone, right?
But knowing it, we need to know all
we need to know it's
going
to happen. And you want to have the sex drive that you want to have.
And hey, maybe that's what you want to do. Go fill your boots, but
Right. But for somebody else to say that's a problem, I have a problem with that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And also actually worrying about your sex drive. I've literally heard and had doctors and been in rooms with other women that have come out, why are we talking about this? Why is that a thing? Well, look, hang on a minute. My kids have all just left home. We're just alone together. Maybe, you know, we've spent 15 years being parents. Maybe we can rekindle some stuff and bring it back again. And I do definitely feel like our sex drives improved and got better. And it shouldn't just be on him. It shouldn't just be on me. We should be able to have this conversation.
I've always thought, if this is just my opinion, that if the United States wasn't originally English, but maybe it was Italian and French, we wouldn't be so uptight about it,
I know,
right?
You know,
I just feel like we're so uptight.
I'm a bit more French. That's maybe why I'm not so uptight. But you know,
uptight about this conversation, and I talk about sex all the time because I think it's not important for everybody. You know, you got to feel people out.
Yes.
And it's nice if you're matched in your sexual drive with your partner, because sometimes that happens. You were never matched well, and those relationships, at least in what I've seen, don't work well, right? But you want to be matched, and if somebody's sex drive is dropping, you want to rise to the occasion for your partner. You want to enjoy it. You don't want to just show up.
But it was okay to produce Viagra.
Well, you're right.
And that was fine, but they weren't doing the same for women. It was just like, we'll get the Viagra, so let's go and find ourselves a younger model. And I think...
And that does happen.
It does, but I don't want to be put out to pasture.
No.
I don't want it to be over. Look, listen, I know I'm not 20 years old. I'm much more interesting than a 20-year-old. But you know what? But at the end of the day, I think it's definitely changing in the medical field, and I think people need to talk about it, but it's okay for us to want sex, it's okay for us to enjoy sex, it's okay for us, but we need to physically be able to keep up with it and feel good about it. Yeah.
We have to figure it out. I mean, I have some female patients whose partner wants to have it 2 or 3 times a day, and they want to be able to keep up. I said, okay, let's make that happen as long as you're not manifesting side effects. And that's my job, right?
Yeah.
You know, that your numbers aren't too high, your hemoglobin isn't getting too high, you don't want to be losing the hair on your head.
Yes, yeah.
You don't want a full-on beard and mustache. I mean, we know enough about transgender people. You can give enough of anybody a different hormone, and they're going to change. So you want the physical response you want without negative side effects. And that goes for every medicine, right? That's where that benefit-risk ratio and proper dosing matters for people. And I think we see more excess in men than women.
Yeah.
But I still have a problem that women should only use it for sex drive because we need it to build bone. We need it for our muscles.
Yeah.
Because as we age, we're fighting muscle loss. You know, we want to be, like you said, strong and vibrant. I'm 65.
And it's amazing.
I don't want to retire.
Yeah.
You know, I want to keep working because as long as
Well, people retire, they die.
they do, you know, and that's what I grew up
I
on
know.
a farm.
Yeah,
Nobody
no.
ever quit.
No,
Nobody
and I
ever
see
quit
that a
working.
lot. You know, my husband runs golf clubs, so we see it happening.
Yeah.
We need to wrap up here very shortly. What I know that you're going to get a nice response from this. I do, and I've been talking about you everywhere. I had a little bit of a health scare lately, so this isn't to do with me taking hormones. 10 years ago, doctors would say it was, and you know that I always go and do some research. So I look back at my notes, and I saw a couple of years ago, I'm obviously preconditioned to be aware of the situation, and mine was about the uterine thickness of my uterus. Where I currently sit is I don't know whether I should keep my uterus or get rid of my uterus. I'm scared of getting rid of my uterus. I've got a lot of scar tissue. There are side effects from taking it away. I don't want to have bowel perforation or bladder issues or prolapse. You know, these are big issues for me.
They're all real, right?
Right? So I would rather keep my body parts as they are. But now I know I don't want a ticking time bomb in my body either.
Right.
I also don't want to stop taking hormones because I know I don't want to live in that way. So together, we need to work on that.
So the balance is, and what has changed recently in my practice is asking women to please get a pelvic ultrasound as well as their bone density, as well as their mammogram when I meet them, if they haven't had something done recently, because then I know where we're starting. So if you've developed a fibroid over the last 20 years, that's from a chronic progesterone deficiency, from what I've seen. That let's get your progesterone level high enough that we can give you the physiological dose of estradiol that meets all of our goals without stimulating the fibroid. And I've had a few people, and interestingly, I take care of a lot of people I know, not that I just have known personally over the years. And sometimes what happens is, no matter what I give in terms of estradiol, that stupid fibroid wants to grow. And then they've tried going off their hormones, and that wasn't any good. And then they decided benefit-risk ratio for them, the hysterectomy was a better option. And these couple times that this has happened, opted to keep their cervix, so they don't have these things because they're like, I want as many parts in place that I can keep, right? And they did fine. And because we can do so many things laparoscopically now, and I just think surgical skills are so much better robotically. I think everything is less scary, but there's still anesthesia risk, as small as it is. But we seem to be less concerned about our anesthesia risk for plastic surgery. You know, and it's a shorter surgery. But I think this is where my practice is being changed, just so I know I know everything about the patient I can possibly know. Because most people don't know they have a fibroid. If somebody comes in and tells me they have a fibroid, that helps me a lot. Or that the lining of their uterus has been thick, well, that helps me a lot too. But if I don't know, I don't know.
No, so we need to know. And I only found out because I decided to take myself for
transvaginal, yes.
Yeah, I'm getting there. See, this is me educating myself. Transvaginal ultrasound because I've got a history of cysts. I've got a historical fibroid. I had these issues, so I wanted to make sure that, and because of that, they found a thicker than normal uterus. Everyone got into a panic. I had to have biopsies and everything, and it wasn't a good period of time for me. But so I actually think that is a whole different conversation. But the end of it, I realised I thought I had to just chuck everything in the bin and just go back to it. I felt quite desperate. One, there was the health risk, and suddenly I was thinking I might have cancer, you know. They did make me feel panicked a little bit, and then the second doctor didn't. I mean, you know, there's no consistency. But I realised, no, I don't need to chuck it all in a bin. Now I need to really start paying attention. I meet women, and this is where I want to end up with you, and you can give us our closing words, but I am seeing women out socially, in my chats, on my book, they are actually not going to talk to anyone, and they are suffering. And I say, well, how long have you been feeling this way? And they'll say, oh, it's been a couple of years. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah. And actually, the longer you leave it, the harder it is to treat you. And it's much, much better to have hormone replacement therapy before you go into full menopause. You do not need to suffer. You could be living a much better life. We may get hit by a bus tomorrow, so do not spend the next 5, 10, 15 years, and it could be 15 years, aging, feeling miserable, not having sex with your husband.
Relationships changing.
All these things.
Affecting your career.
Yes. So what they need to do?
I would say make an appointment with somebody you trust, right? Make sure it's an individualized approach.
Yeah.
Follow the podcast, you know, learn, and progesterone first. If you need estradiol, get the pelvic ultrasound, get the bone density, because we didn't even talk about that. And testosterone can be delivered very, very safely. Now, I want to end with because we know we're getting more cancers across the board, right? That everyone's saying get a mammogram at age 40. And that's because we're seeing earlier breast cancers. We never used to see breast cancers unless it was like a BRCA positive individual until after menopause. That's when we did our mammograms. But now women are getting them at 40, but you want to do it after your period when your breasts are less naturally dense. And Dr. Attia, who just wrote this book, he's going one step further and encouraging women, even if you have to pay cash, then at a 6-month interval, get a breast ultrasound. Because if the data over a lifespan is 1 in 8 women get breast cancer, and I'm not seeing that in my practice, but if 1 in 8 is going to get breast cancer, get it diagnosed early so we can do something about it. And hormones do not cause cancer. I think we need to look at everything else that in how we live our lives in terms of the environmental pollutants and start cutting back on microplastics and how we source our food and what we eat and when we eat and go from there. But you do have to be an advocate for your health. And I don't care where you live, you should be an advocate for your health because healthcare's changed so much. It's never going to be the way it used to be. You know, we should be on our portals, we should be looking, we should be reading. And if you don't understand, then just make another appointment. Like, for example, if you had labs and you don't understand your labs, then make a follow-up appointment to go over them. Just pay your copay and go, you know. And everybody's welcome to come see me. And I tell people, use me the way that serves you. And I think that's the best way I could say it.
This has been fabulous. So much information.
I know.
I know people are going to want you to come back. And thank you so much for helping me. And I'm being transparent because I want to help you. If you were feeling even a tiny bit how I was feeling at that time, you really don't want to be there, and I don't want you to be there. So thank you so much for coming along. It was been a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. I feel so honored to be here.
Thank you.